The year without a summer. When the sky choked the world, they called it the 1800 and froze to death. In the early months of 1816, the citizens of the United States, a young nation still recovering from the wounds of the War of 1812, believed they were witnessing the literal end of days. Farmers in Vermont woke up in June to find their cornfields buried under a foot of heavy, suffocating snow. In July, families in Massachusetts huddled around roaring fireplaces, wrapped in heavy winter cloaks just to survive the breakfast hour. Birds dropped dead from the sky in Pennsylvania, frozen mid-flight, while a strange bluish fog blanketed the sun, turning it into a pale, powerless disk that could be stared at with the naked eye. No one knew why the world had gone dark. No one knew why the earth had forgotten how to warm itself. Thousands of miles away, buried deep beneath the sapphire waters of the Dutch East Indies, lay a monstrous secret. The Americans shivering in their cabins had no concept of global weather systems, no telegraphs to transmit worldwide news, and no idea that their misery had been born a year prior on the other side of the planet, in a catastrophic firestorm that shook the very foundations of the Earth. The true story of the greatest climate anomaly in recorded human history began on April 5, 1815, on the island of Sumbawa. There stood Mount Tambora, a towering, majestic volcanic peak that local villagers regarded with a mix of reverence and casual familiarity. For more than 3 centuries, Tambora had been quiet. It was a dormant giant, its slopes lush with dense green vegetation, dotted with thriving villages where people grew rice, traded in horses, and lived under the tropical sun. But beneath the surface, a colossal chamber of magma had been brewing, trapping unimaginable amounts of gas under immense, volatile pressure. When the mountain finally cracked, it didn't just erupt, it detonated. The initial explosions on April 5th were so violently loud that British authorities in Batavia, more than 750 miles away, mistook the sound for distant cannon fire. Believing a naval vessel was under attack by pirates, the governor dispatched troops to investigate the coastline. They found nothing but the echoing rhythmic thudding of the earth. 5 days later, on April 10th, the mountain completely disintegrated. 3 massive columns of liquid fire shot into the stratosphere, merging into a single terrifying wall of flame that reached 25 miles into the sky. The entire mountain seemed to turn into a liquid mass of white-hot lava. A series of pyroclastic flows, superheated avalanches of gas, ash, and rock moving at hundreds of miles per hour, raced down the slopes. They instantly vaporized the kingdom of Tambora and its 10,000 inhabitants. The sheer force of the eruption triggered massive tsunamis that slammed into neighboring islands, wiping out coastal towns and tearing ships from their moorings. The sound of the final explosion was heard across a radius of 1,600 miles. To put that into a modern American context, it would be equivalent to an explosion in Denver, Colorado, being heard clearly by citizens in New York City, Miami, and Los Angeles simultaneously.
When the dust finally settled weeks later, Mount Tambora, which had once stood over 14,000 feet tall, had lost a third of its height. In its place was a massive, yawning crater 4 miles wide and thousands of feet deep. An estimated 100,000 people died in the immediate aftermath, either consumed by the fires, crushed by falling debris, or starved to death as a thick layer of toxic ash choked out the region's agricultural lands, poisoned the drinking water, and killed off livestock. Yet the true devastation of Tambora was not local. It was just beginning its slow, silent march across the globe. During the eruption, Tambora had blasted an unfathomable volume of material into the upper atmosphere. Along with billions of tons of ash and dust, it injected roughly 60 million tons of sulfur dioxide straight into the stratosphere. There, the gas reacted with water vapor to to create a highly reflective aerosol veil of sulfate particles. This invisible airborne shroud did not dissipate. Instead, caught in the high-altitude global wind currents, it began to spread like a planetary blanket. Within months, the aerosol cloud wrapped around the entire Earth, acting as a massive celestial mirror that reflected the sun's incoming solar radiation back out into the cold vacuum of space. The planet was about to cool down drastically and dangerously. By the time the spring of 1816 arrived in the United States, the young nation was eager for a prosperous growing season. The war with Great Britain was over, trade was reopening, and families were expanding westward into the frontier. But as April bled into May, the expected warmth of spring never arrived. Instead, an ominous dry fog settled over parts of New England and the mid-Atlantic. The fog was unlike anything the settlers had ever seen. It did not burn away in the morning sun. It stayed, casting an eerie reddish-purple hue over the twilights and dimming the midday sun so much that sunspots could be seen clearly without filters. Farmers noticed that even when the skies cleared, the air remained biting sharp and smelling faintly of sulfur. Then came June. On June 6, 1816, residents of Boston, Massachusetts, woke up to a sight that defied all logic. Large, heavy snowflakes were drifting down from the sky, blanketing the cobblestone streets and early summer gardens. In Vermont and New Hampshire, the storm was even more severe. Nearly a foot of snow accumulated across the hillsides. Sheep that had just been sheared for the summer froze to death in their pastures by the thousands. Farmers rushed into their fields in a desperate, heartbreaking attempt to cover their fragile young corn crops with blankets, tarps and inverted wooden boxes, but the freezing temperatures penetrated deep into the soil, killing the roots. The newspapers of the era, printed on manual presses and distributed by horse-drawn carriages, began to chronicle a growing panic. The Boston Patriot reported on the unprecedented weather with a mixture of journalistic duty and sheer disbelief. The weather has been remarkably cold. We have had frosts every night, and the ground is frozen to a considerable depth. The prospects for crops are gloomy indeed. People did not understand the science of what was happening. To the deeply religious population of early 19th century America, this sudden, unnatural winter felt like the wrath of an angry god. Churches were packed to capacity on weekdays with preachers delivering hellfire sermons, warning their congregations that the sun was burning out and that humanity was being punished for its sins. As July approached, the weather became a chaotic, psychological roller coaster. The temperature would occasionally spike to a normal, humid summer high of 80 degrees, giving the weary population a fleeting sense of hope. But within 24 hours, a violent Arctic cold front would sweep down from Canada, dropping the temperature by 40 or 50 degrees in a matter of hours. On Independence Day, July 4, 1816, Americans attempted to celebrate their hard-won liberty, but the atmosphere was grim. In Savannah, Georgia, the heat was stifling, but further north, in New York and Connecticut, citizens attended parades wrapped in heavy overcoats, mittens, and woolen scarves. The traditional outdoor picnics were moved indoors, crowded around hearths that had to be kept burning constantly. The agricultural heart of New England was failing. Corn, the absolute staple of both human diet and livestock feed in the Northeast, simply could not grow. The stalks that managed to survive the June frosts were stunted, turning a sickly, dark, withered color before dying in the July freezes. The price of grain began to skyrocket. A bushel of corn that had cost less than $1 the previous year surged to $4 or $5, an astronomical sum for a working-class family in 1816. Oatmeal, flour, and meat became luxury items. The poor were reduced to foraging in the woods for wild roots, nettles, and berries, or slaughtering their invaluable workhorses and milch cows just to keep their children from starving. The crisis was not confined to America. Across the Atlantic Ocean, Europe was suffering an even worse fate. The continent was already exhausted and broken from the devastation of the Napoleonic Wars, which had only ended a year prior at the Battle of Waterloo. Now the weather was destroying what little infrastructure remained. In Great Britain, Ireland and France, continuous torrential rains fell throughout the summer months. It rained for weeks without a single hour of sunshine. The cold, wet conditions caused the potato and wheat crops to rot right in the ground. In Ireland, the disaster was a cruel preview of the Great Famine that would strike decades later. The potato crop failed completely, and a typhus epidemic fueled by malnutrition and unsanitary, crowded conditions swept through the population, killing tens of thousands. In Switzerland, the situation was so dire that the government declared a state of national emergency. The alpine glaciers, instead of melting slightly in the summer heat, actually advanced down the mountainsides, crushing villages and swallowing up valuable pasture lands. People were reduced to eating a horrific bread made from a mixture of ground moss, sawdust and straw. Food riots broke out in markets across France and Germany. Angry, starving mobs intercepted grain carts, looted bakeries, and fought with authorities in the streets. It became the worst famine in Europe during the entire 19th century. Yet, out of this global misery and darkness, a strange, immortal spark of human creativity was ignited. In June of 1816, a group of young, brilliant, and famously eccentric English writers decided to take a summer vacation in Switzerland. The group included the brilliant poet Percy Bysshe Shelley, his 18-year-old lover Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin, and the scandalous, legendary poet Lord Byron. They rented a beautiful estate, the Villa Diodati, on the shores of Lake Geneva, expecting a summer of boating, hiking under the Swiss sun, and writing poetry in the fresh mountain air. Instead, they found themselves trapped inside a living nightmare. The rain fell in unrelenting, violent sheets. The sky was permanently dark, bruised, and flashes of lightning illuminated a landscape that looked more like the end of the world than a summer resort. For days on end, the group was confined inside the gloomy rooms of the villa, listening to the wind howl off the lake. To pass the time and combat the deep, suffocating depression that the weather was causing, Lord Byron made a proposition to his guests. We will each write a ghost story. The challenge was accepted. Sitting around a crackling fire, fueled by wine and the eerie Gothic atmosphere of the unnatural summer, they began to write. Lord Byron wrote a fragment about a mysterious character that would later inspire his physician, John Polidori, to write The Vampire, the very first modern vampire story in Western literature, which would lay the groundwork for Bram Stoker's Dracula. But it was Mary Godwin who had the most profound, world-altering vision. One night, after a long discussion about the nature of life, the principle of electricity, and whether a corpse could ever be reanimated, she fell into a troubled, waking nightmare. When she opened her eyes, she looked out into the pitch-black Swiss night and saw the framework of a story. She began to write. It was on a dreary night of November that I beheld the accomplishment of my toils. She changed the setting to November, but the dark, cold, and stormy atmosphere she described was exactly what she was experiencing outside her window in the middle of June. That story would eventually be published as Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus. The monster, born out of darkness, isolation, and the hubris of man, was a direct psychological reflection of a world that felt like it had been abandoned by the sun. Meanwhile, Lord Byron captured the grim reality of the 1816 atmosphere in his famous haunting poem Darkness, which began with the unforgettable lines, I had a dream, which was not all a dream. The bright sun was extinguished, and the stars did wander darkling in the eternal space. rayless and pathless, and the icy earth swung blind and blackening in the moonless air. Back in the United States, the long-term consequences of the year without a summer were altering the very geography and political future of the nation. New England had long been the cultural and economic powerhouse of the young country, but the total failure of the 1816 harvest convinced tens of thousands of families that the region was no longer viable for farming. The soil was rocky, the winters were naturally harsh, and if the climate was changing permanently, they would face certain starvation. A massive, unprecedented migration began. It was dubbed Ohio Fever. Farmers packed their entire lives into sturdy covered wagons, abandoned their ancestral homesteads in Vermont, Massachusetts, and Connecticut, and began a perilous journey westward. They crossed the Appalachian Mountains, searching for flatter, more fertile land where the climate might be more forgiving. This sudden influx of thousands of hardy, desperate New Englanders accelerated the settlement of the American Midwest. States like Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois saw their populations explode in the years immediately following 1816. This massive demographic shift fundamentally changed the political map of America, shifting agricultural power away from the East Coast and laying the foundation for the Midwest to become the eventual breadbasket of the world. Among those families affected by the agricultural collapse of 1816 was a poor farmer named Joseph Smith Sr. living in Norwich, Vermont. His crops failed completely for 3 consecutive years, culminating in the disaster of 1816. Facing financial ruin, Smith packed up his family, including his young 10-year-old son, Joseph Smith Jr., and moved west to the town of Palmyra in western New York. It was there, in the woods of Palmyra, a few years later, that young Joseph Smith Jr. would claim to receive the visions that led to the founding of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the Mormon Church. Had the weather in Vermont been warm and prosperous in 1816, the Smith family likely would have stayed put, and one of the largest homegrown American religions might never have been founded. The year also brought about unexpected technological innovations. In Germany, a young inventor named Karl Dreiss watched with sorrow as horses were slaughtered because there was no grain or oats to feed them. Realizing that humanity needed a method of personal transportation that did not rely on living, breathing animals, Dreiss began working on a mechanical alternative. He invented a 2-wheeled wooden machine that the rider straddled and propelled forward by pushing their feet against the ground. He called it the Lauf machine, running machine. It was the direct, undeniable ancestor of the modern bicycle. The global shortage of horse feed caused by a volcano in Indonesia had forced the birth of green, human-powered transportation. As 1816 drew to a close, the atmospheric veil began to slowly thin out. The sulfur particles fell to Earth in rain and snow, and the oceans gradually absorbed the excess chemicals. The spring of 1817 arrived with a welcome, beautiful warmth. The sun broke through the strange blue fog, looking bright, gold and powerful once again. The crops returned, the fields turned green, and the immediate panic subsided. For nearly a century, the year without a summer remained a bizarre, unexplained legend in American folklore. Grandparents would sit by the fire in the late 1800s, telling their grandchildren about the year it snowed in July, and the children would laugh, thinking it was nothing more than an exaggerated tall tale from the old days. It wasn't until the 20th century, with the birth of modern volcanology, ice core drilling, and climatology, that scientists finally connected the dots. By analyzing deep ice cores from Greenland and Antarctica, researchers found a massive layer of volcanic sulfur dating exactly to late 1815. They matched this chemical signature directly to the remnants of Mount Tambora. The mystery was solved. The frozen fields of Vermont, the dark Gothic rooms of Switzerland, the bread riots of France, and the invention of the bicycle were all interconnected threads of a single cosmic tapestry woven by a mountain that blew itself apart on a remote tropical island. The year without a summer stands as a powerful, humbling historical reminder of how fragile human civilization truly is. With all of our technology, political power, and ambitions, we are ultimately guests on a restless, volatile planet, forever at the mercy of the skies above our heads and the fires beneath our feet.